Hey, welcome to this live Q&A. It's actually my first for Couple Money. I'm excited and nervous because I don't do a lot of video. You might know me from the podcast, which is audio only, or from the articles on Couple Money site. But I am very, I'm motivated to get out of my comfort zone and talk to you about something I think that's important, and it's getting on the same page with your money. Now, one of my goals for 2017 is to help 100,000 people. And that is a huge goal. But I think I can do this by putting myself out there and trying to help you guys out with questions that you have about money and how to work together. So, in case you're joining us for the first time, the theme of this is how to get on the same page with your financial goals. And I think this is absolutely essential to marriage because money is not the most important thing. But if you don't take care of your finances, it can really mess up your marriage. And one second, I just want to make sure I got the sound. Okay, hopefully that looks better. Sorry about that. So let's talk about financial goals for the year and what people are making for 2017, what they've done in the past and how they're doing now. Fidelity had a study, and I found it interesting that 36% of Americans have put finances as one of their big goals, and that's fantastic. And actually, the three biggest money goals are all wonderful. They're paying down debt, saving more, and spending less. And I have to say that is absolutely essential because if you want to build wealth together, you're going to have to build that gap between what you earn and what you spend. And it's not easy, but it is doable. If you listen to the podcast, you've heard me have on just so many different families and couples that have worked together to do that, to get out of debt, to retire early in some cases, but more importantly, just to have more options as a couple and as a family. So let me get a little more into goals and why having goals are important, but why most people fail. Having goals gives you a direction. It gives you something to focus on. But the problem with those goals that people make every year, like I mentioned, paying down debt, spending less, and saving more, is that they're missing key ingredients. Now, you may have picked up on this, but they're vague. They don't have a how, and more importantly, there's no why behind it. And I'll get into this. I'm actually going to go in the reverse order. I'm going to start with why. Getting your finances squared away is great, but if you want to stay motivated, if you two want to not only build wealth but grow stronger in your marriage, it really pays to sit down and discuss why you want to do this. Sounds a little too simple, but it really is effective. For example, why do you two want to get out of debt? I know a lot of couples, what they do is they'll say, okay, we are $40,000 in debt and it's overwhelming. We're going to go and set up a plan and pay for it. But they don't make it because they get frustrated, especially if you have like multiple accounts like credit cards, student loans, car loans, and you feel like we only can put an extra 100, 200, whatever it is, into the debt snowball or whatever plan you have, and we're not making a dent. And what makes a big difference is reminding yourselves why. Give yourselves a light at the end of the tunnel. When you pay off your debt, what are you able to do as you're paying off your debt? What are you able to do as a couple, as a family? And so I know for us, we wanted to get out of the car loan faster. I got a car loan, and you can read the story on the site or hear it on the podcast. And it was a stupid decision. I was a working college student. I thought I deserved it, but I had a horrible rate on the loan. And more importantly, it just wasn't necessary. And it was an obligation and a debt I had to pay off. So when we talked about this, we discussed why this was so important. And again, it was an obligation to us. And at that time, I was a working college student and I had an internship, which was a fantastic one. I love the team and everything. But like many internships, it kind of had an unknown end date. Originally, was supposed to be for a semester, but it continued a little bit longer. But I didn't know when that would have ended. Having a debt kind of motivated me. Of course, you want to focus on your job anyways, but I knew that I couldn't leave that job, say if another opportunity came up, unless we were, dumping the debt. So that's something you want to talk about when you don't have any debt, or at least if you don't want to have any credit card debt. What can you guys do? And I think nowadays, with a lot of Gen Xers and millennials, there's that question of, do I really care about the money, or do I really want more freedom and options? And it's okay to want more options. So that's fine, while taking care of the important things. So again, it's not just about, okay, I'm going to get out of credit card debt. I'm getting out of credit card debt because we want to have more options. Maybe one of you want to start a business. Maybe you guys want to start a family. I mean, a good many of you probably want to do both. And the less debt you have, it can give you an opportunity to try different things and not feel so stressed out knowing that you have these payments you have to make. So that was talking about why, and discussing that and including that in your goal. The second one is the how. And the reason I started with the why is, once you have an idea of why you're doing something and why it matters to you, then it's a little bit easier to start discussing how you're going to do it. And I think this is important because a lot of us have great intentions, but the reality of it is we're very busy. And so when we're busy, we tend to forget about goals, especially new ones where we don't have the habits. So my suggestion in crafting this how is, make sure you have a system in place, and I'll talk about this later, and then also have some habits that you develop to keep you guys motivated and sticking with us. And then the last part of this is looking at your well, the bad example was being vague. So look at your goal and how can you really define it. This is important because you want to have some way to measure your progress, good or bad. I hope it's always good, but life has setbacks. And when you know what you're measuring or what you're working towards, it's easier to course correct. So when you do those money dates that I always suggest you guys do, don't worry, it's not pulling up spreadsheets. You can sit down and just say, okay, last month we did pretty good. We paid down $200 on our credit card, or we paid $1,000 on this student loan. Those are wins you want to celebrate. And if you fall short, you still want to celebrate the progress you have, but then you can kind of talk about and dream up ways of fixing that and improving and working towards your goal. So if you have any questions about that, please put that in the chat and I'd be happy to help out. In the meantime, I'm going to move on to something that I think we all want to do, which is kind of get our spouse on board with whatever goal we have. And I'm just going to look at my notes for just a second. But there's a lot of reasons our spouse doesn't want to do, this great plan. I've been there. I'm definitely someone who gets excited about something, and I know, okay, let's eat rice and beans and just get this done. And I can sustain it for a few months or whatever. But my husband's just not that personality. So I've been there and done that. What you need to do is find out why they're not on board. And there's two major components to this. One, they might actually be on board with your goal, but they're not on board with how you want to get there. And two is they just don't think it's important enough, or they feel like this goal doesn't really jive with your big picture view. So my suggestion is, again, when you're writing those goals out, we kind of go back to the beginning. Start with your why. Sit down together and tell them. Be completely honest. I'm serious about this. Sometimes we'll, dance around. You want to be clear about why this matters to you. So tell them, I have a hard time sleeping at night, and I want to have some peace of mind knowing that we have some more options together with our finances if we get out of debt. You can also discuss what you want to do together after you're out of debt. Maybe you said, I know you want to start a business and I want to support you on that. The best way to do that, in my opinion, and just say it's an opinion. It's okay. You guys are working on your dream, so it's subjective. Is I want us to have the ability to cut back easily so we can temporarily, put the money towards you starting a business, or put money towards a baby fund if you want to do that, or I want to give more and volunteer. So I need to know that we don't have so many debts and I can feel comfortable volunteering and donating towards causes and people that matter most to me. So I would always start with the why and see if you can get on board from there with that. And then you might get that situation where, okay, they are pumped to get out of debt. They're ready to get out of debt. Maybe not as much as you. And they saw your plan and they're thinking, that's too much. Either they think it's too difficult and they won't succeed, or you guys won't do it together, or they feel like you're going to be missing out. And if you haven't already, there's a really great episode. And so I'm going to kind of take this from Tony Husbands from Debt Free Divas. And these are tips that have helped me and helped other couples. Is she was in a situation where they were $100,000 in debt, and her husband and her wanted to get out of debt, but they weren't agreeing with the how. And she was a big fan of Dave Ramsey. And if you're not familiar with him, they have this gazelle intensity, which is rice and beans. You pay the essentials, you take care of the minimums, and then you go focus and all gung-ho on the debts. And she had to kind of step back and realize that to push him in a direction that he didn't want to go to at that time wasn't going to work out for their marriage. And I say put your marriage first, but that doesn't mean neglecting your finances. And she had such wisdom that she thought, you know what? I can change my behavior. I can start making cuts in expenses, finding frugal things to do with the family. I can, manage the income and the budget. And so she took the initiative. She went ahead and started modeling the behavior she hoped her husband would go for, and it worked. He eventually got on board, and they found a way to not only get out of debt, which I think was huge and a fantastic accomplishment, but more importantly, they did it together. So it is not impossible to get your spouse on board, but sometimes you're going to have to take the lead, and don't nag them and saying, okay, look at this. I am trying to save money and you're not helping. Saying, I did this. I feel great. Did you notice we paid off this credit card? Or did you notice we're 3 months ahead on the car payment? It's those little things. Celebrate the positive, and you'll be surprised how many people respond to that. And I know married couples, we want to be on the same wavelength. We want to do it together and same pace, but don't be afraid to adjust your pace to get your spouse on board. So that's my last tip with that is I want to make sure that if your spouse is on board with getting out of debt and they're willing to make certain changes, that you say, okay, we don't have to go gazelle intense, but we can cut our expenses by X% together. I'd rather you do it together than you guys kind of go your own separate paths. It's all about encouraging. It's all about motivating each other and keeping one another in the loop. So if you have any questions, just put that in the chat. I want to help out. And if you have any stories of successes, please share them. Definitely want to encourage everybody. I think this is an important message to get out there and to help others, not just couples, but everybody get better with their finances and be in a better position. Okay. And last part, I'm just going to make sure. Okay. Now we're going to kind of get into my excitement is like making new goals for the year. And I think the way we present goals and the way we create goals can either increase or decrease our chances of success. And what do I mean by that? When you make a goal, as you saw before, what doesn't work, you want to make sure that you are putting into place things that can help you see a clear path and also keep your destination or goal in mind while you're on that path. So, one thing I suggest if you haven't already is creating a SMART goal. And SMART goals are important because, and I won't get into too much of the details there, because if you're a regular listener or reader, you've heard me say this over and over again. But the key components for me is they're very specific. So you want to get out of debt. I keep saying this because this is the number one goal. You want to get out of debt. Well, how much debt do you have? So that means that you guys have to sit down and pull the numbers. And if you have kind of a fear, like, oh my goodness, I have so many accounts between, um, your spouse's account, your account, the joint accounts, your retirement. One tool I highly recommend is Personal Capital. That's what we use. Another great one, you can use Mint. There's You Need a Budget. There is Tiller. The point is, use what works for you. I don't care, what your preference is. Mine is Personal Capital. But have a way for you guys to pull in all those numbers. And so you objectively have in mind where you're at now. So, okay, so you're creating those goals. You have this information of where you are. Again, looking at that why. Before you create that goal, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? Why? So I call this kind of the dream phase, and it is okay. You guys can say, let's sit down and talk about what we want to do in 2017. I'll jot down some of my ideas. We actually did this. I jot down a couple ideas I had. He jotted down some of his, and for the most part, we were on the same. But there was one huge area we didn't agree on. And that's fine. It's actually normal for couples not to immediately be on that same line, same page. It's how do you go from there and work together to achieve that goal? So for us, we were talking about vacations and trips. And I love to travel, whether it's a weekend trip, go out of country, go cross country. I'm into travel. My husband, in the last couple of years, isn't, and I wasn't aware at that time until we actually had this discussion, that his hang up was with two little ones, and we have little ones 5 and under. They do make it a little more stressful to get their bags ready, get their routine, take them around, and do the stuff we want to do and still keep their pace. So at first, when we sat down and we talked about the goals, it was he was here, and I was here. And at first, like, how do you go from this binary choice of I want to do more trips and I want to do less trips? So when you talk about your why and what you want to do and why aren't you on board? And don't phrase it like why don't you want to do that? Say, there must be a reason you feel this way. Do you mind telling me? And he opened up. And so what we were able to do is create a, how should I say, a compromise that didn't feel like a compromise, which to me is a win-win, is we are going to do trips. Yay for me. But we're going to do more couples trips. So we're going to have the kids with the grandparents, friends. And then for some of the trips, we'll have someone with us to help out with the kids. Now, that does mean we have to save money. If we're going to leave it with the grandparents for a couple days, that's not a big deal. They love having, a fun time. But if we leave them for a little bit longer than a couple days, I want to make sure they have the stuff, whoever's taking care of them, in the budget. And then if we bring anybody, and if we've done it in the past and it's not too much more expensive, we have to put that in our budget. But talking it out and working together on these discussions made all the difference for us, and it will for you. So make sure you establish very specifically what you're working toward and why you're working towards it. And then if you remember, I talked about SMART, we're doing that measurable. So how are you going to measure the progress you make? So Personal Capital or whatever app you want to use, you can track your numbers, whether it's savings, paying down debt, or just spending less and cutting back on your expenses. Those are all very important, and you need a way for you to objectively see, because it is very easy as a couple. And if we've done this, been there, done that for a lot of these things, where we don't make a goal. And then we'll say, okay, well, you know what? You spent a lot of money on this X, Y, and Z. And it's easy to see the other side. Like, you bought all these tech parts. And, he would be like, how many times have you bought books this week and magazines and you're done with them? So you're wasting money on this expense. And I'm like, you're wasting money on this expense. Look at the numbers objectively. And it kind of takes the two of you out of the equation. So you're on the same side versus fighting each other. And then you want to have systems in place. And what I mean by systems is, how can you set things up so the default is you actually achieving your goal? And one thing I found that's made absolutely a huge difference is automating our finances. So say you decide you're going to save more. You guys have no emergency fund and you don't want to be in that situation. I recommend seeing how much, come up with that number that you're looking for, and set up an automatic transfer. As soon as that deposit clears, the next day that transfer goes. And it sounds like a small thing, or you think, well, you know what, I can just do it manually. But I will tell you from personal experience, it is harder to keep on task when you have so many things going on. And I don't mean this as you're ignoring your money and it's not important to you, but like I mentioned at the beginning, money is usually not the most important thing to us. We have, if your parents' kids, we have our friends, our family, loved ones, you have work, you might do volunteering. I mean, it just gets really crowded. So when you have a system in place, what it does is it kind of is a safety net, and that will help you to make sure you reach your goal, even if you get overwhelmed with other very important things, without neglecting your finances. So I highly recommend automating. I don't know any major bank or credit union that will charge you for bill pay, but if you are at a place where they do charge you for automatic transfers and stuff, please move your money, because there is no reason you should be giving up your money to manage your money better. That makes no sense. And if you need recommendations, I have that on my site. There's some wonderful ones. If you want online only, we use Capital One 360. We also use locally a credit union. I'm proud to say Coastal over here in Raleigh. And credit unions are one of my favorites to recommend, just because the business model is you're not a customer, you're a member. So you own the credit union. And you usually will get better rates and bonuses than if you went with a big bank or at one of those typically huge banks. So getting back to with the goals and the systems, just have something set aside, and it might take 10, 15 minutes. If it's something massive, maybe half an hour at most, but then you're done. That's it. You don't have to do it again. That's what helps with automating and creating these systems. And then the last thing is, you should still change your habits. I know sometimes we get into this, well, I just automated my money, and so I don't need to do anything else. There's still no one in the world that's going to care about your money like you do. So it pays for you to get into the habit. One of the most important habits, whatever your goal is being aware of how much money is in your bank account, as a general rule of thumb. Now, you might not know the dollar amount. I know for me, I'm not aware, but I know when I get paid, it's X amount in the account. And then once all the bills are paid, I know how much should be in the bank. So when I log in, it's really just 2 minutes. Is the money there? Is anything out of the ordinary? Let me check, and done. So for us to look at all of our bank accounts and our investments accounts, it is 15 minutes tops. So I really highly recommend getting into that habit, knowing where your money is and having a way to check that in. And then another great habit to have is having money dates. And I think I'm going to do a Q&A session on this if you guys want, is what I mean about money dates and how to set that up for your particular situation, your particular personality. But it basically is a check-in. And for some people that I've interviewed on the podcast, they do it on a weekly basis. Sometimes they do it twice a week. But most people do it monthly. But I was fascinated by how many couples, the ones that got out of six figures of debt, the ones that are retired in their 30s, they have a way to talk to each other about money without stressing out. And a big reason is they focus on the why and then they look at the numbers. So have that as a habit, at least at the beginning of the month, if you want to start getting things ready. But if you want to be proactive, I suggest right before the first, maybe a couple of days before the first, sit down, look at how the previous month went, and then make your budget for the next month. And there's different ways of doing that. I feel like we can jump into so many rabbit holes with this conversation, but I just want to keep it on getting goals set up for 2017. That's absolutely crucial to um, having a plan for your money, because when you don't, the money tends to be spent, whether you make a plan for it or not, but it doesn't help you as much. And then sometimes it harms you when you don't tell your money where to go. So make a budget. There's a lot of free apps out there. If you do the spreadsheet, go for it. If you prefer like Mint, they have a budget option. If you're someone who likes to use a really fancy app, I like Every Dollar, and that's a zero-based budget. That means every dollar that you have is allocated towards a goal. Now, that doesn't mean it's inflexible. It just means that if things change, maybe you overspent eating out, you can adjust it. But this will tend to keep you on budget much closer than some other systems. So if you guys are just starting out with budgets, try a zero-based budget. It's really effective. And if you're one of those people that hate details, you want to keep it as simple as possible, then try a 50-20-30 budget. And I will definitely point you to the podcast. It's called, the episode I think is Budgets for Couples Who Hate to Budget. I mean, that's the best I can come up with. But it's basically the easiest budgets that are still effective. So those are the two I recommend if you're new with budgeting or you haven't been successful before, is zero-based budgets and 50-20-30 budgets. Those will at least keep you paying down debt if you have any, or saving more and investing. And then you can always, adjust it. And I'm a big believer of make it work for you. You don't have to, obsess over too much of the details. So, is there any question that anyone has about getting on the same page with goals? I'll be happy to help. And also, if you have any recommendations for the next Q&A, I think I'm going to start doing this at least twice a month. I would like to do weekly, but I'm going to pace myself since this is so new to me and say twice a month. So if you have any suggestions or ideas, let me know, and I will be happy to help out. And if not, I just want to let you know, you can always check me out at couplemoney.com. I will take your questions there. I am happy to answer what I can or point you in the direction of someone who is a specialist, someone who maybe has been there, because my goal is to help you. And then also, if you haven't already subscribed, go to Couple Money Podcast. That is where I basically grab all these stories from just couples who have been there, done that. They've been in the trenches. They've gotten out of debt. Like I mentioned, they retired early in 30s, and they've done these things together. So we hear their story, but then we also kind of pull out what are the principles that you can use, because every couple is different and every couple has their own DNA. And I want you guys to succeed with your finances. So I appreciate you guys taking a little bit of your lunch break to chat with me, and I will see you again. Take care.